Hello there everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Joesephyr and today I'm going to be filming a bit of a different video when it comes to Dissidia Final Fantasy Opera Omnia. Now I'm sure you guys have read the title and the truth is that I have been feeling a little creatively stifled by Dissidia Opera Omnia and a little bit disenchanted with it. And I've been really worried about speaking my truth about it on YouTube because obviously as somebody who is a content creator for the game, obviously we want to be encouraging to everything about it. But there's been some things that have kind of come to my attention over the past, I want to say the past year, like since I've been streaming it regularly, and you know, things that have happened more recently, as well as watching things in the JP version of the game that kind of concern me, and I wanted to voice those concerns because while we still love the game and everything, I think it's healthy to look at the things that we enjoy and critique them. So if you want to know more about what I have to say on the matter as well as various other things, then perhaps stay tuned and keep on watching. Now before we get started, obviously I'll say all my normal thing and say just not forget to check all of my social links in the description box below. But the next thing I'm going to say is what this video is not. Now what this video is not is a doom and gloom video, the game's terrible, everyone abandoned ship, this, that and the other. That is not what this is about. Because something I am going to be doing in this video is, as well as talking about the things in Dissidia that make me a little unhappy and a little concerned for the future, I am also going to talk about the things that I think Dissidia gets right, because it is still a good game, there is still a lot of very positive aspects to it, and I definitely want to turn attention to those as well. It is also not a sign that I am quitting making Dissidia Opera Omnia videos. Again, I want to reiterate that while I want to critique some of the stuff that's going on, as well as talk about recent events with regards to the Setzer sort of debacle that everyone's kind of talking about, which I'll go into first and foremost, I am not stopping to creating Dissidia Opera Omnia content or anything of the sort. I will be continuing as normal. This is just a video that is allowing me to kind of speak my truth when it comes to how I feel about the game. And obviously I will be creating other content for other games going forward as well. It's something I've spoken about for a long time, but I've honestly been very frightened to do because I'm really scared of the idea of alienating you guys as my Dissidia Opera Omnia following. But I want to kind of vary things up a little bit, and for nobody, you know, there's nobody that I appreciate more for supporting my content than my patrons. Now, obviously, with Patreon, I shout out one of my patrons every time I release a video, and today that person is going to be Charles Weebly, who is brand new to my Patreon, and a massive thank you goes out to you and all of my patrons who I have been speaking to more recently about the idea of me doing newer content that's slightly different from what I currently do, and really, it's been really lovely to get such a blessing from you guys, and I hope that those of you who just watch my videos feel the same way. So if you're interested in getting a title card just like this one here, as well as lots of other benefits such as voice chats we all do together, being a part of Would You Pull, which again is not changing anytime soon, and lots of other stuff, that perhaps you'd like to consider becoming a patron yourself. And of course, don't forget to check out all of the other wonderful content creators out there as well for Dissidia, because there's a lot of people out there that do very hard work for this game, and I very much encourage you to go and go and watch their content, go and speak to them on their streams, all sorts of other things, and there's lots of other resources pertaining to the game, all of which is linked in the description box below. So before we go on to kind of like the greater sort of issues that I have with Dissidia at the moment, I want to talk about all of this news going around about Setzer not having Tidus BT on his banner. Now this is something that has come about in quite explosively, and it came about while I was away, and I came back to do my streams and I was like, oh okay, this is happening. So apparently Setzer's banner, which is featured within the near future, the reason that I'm making this video as opposed to a Should You Pull for this Friday is because with the Equinox banner coming up, we don't actually know exactly what it is. So I don't want to pass comment on something that we don't have all of the information for. And that extends into this issue with Tidus BT not potentially being on Setzer's LD banner. We don't know everything about what's going to happen with that. My assumption is that because of these Equinox events, which I originally assumed would contain Setzer LD, they're instead going to contain something else. So I assume that one of them will have the triple BT banner of Varn, Arden and Kefka. The other one, I honestly don't know. Sound off in the comments below if you think you do. But I think that because of this, what's happened is that Setzer is being pushed back slightly and will probably instead contain Una BT. This is purely speculative. I don't know anything that's going to happen, so I could be completely wrong. Now, obviously, people are upset about the fact that they've been saving their gems to try to pull for Tidus BT on Setzer's LD banner, which I completely respect. As a matter of fact, I'm actually in exactly that same position. I don't currently own Tidus BT, and Setzer's banner was the one that I was planning on pulling for it for. But obviously, if that's not the case, then I, would consider using my BT tokens on Tidus, although I'm also considering not using my BT tokens on Tidus, and we'll get to that in a little while as to why. But I also understand that not everyone has the capabilities to do that, and therefore they're upset that they have to pull a banner they weren't planning for. The thing to remember with any of this sort of thing is as much as the developers of the game are able to make global exclusive content like Core. We've just had Core not too long ago, who is an insanely powerful character for this point in the game and pairs up very well with a lot of things and is very clearly strong, but more importantly is new and unprecedented. These things have to kind of, in terms of scheduling versus the JP version, some concessions have to be made in order to fit these things in. So within a batch where Tidus actually had an extra banner in his batch, which was Setzer's LD, they are within their rights to move things around. And that's probably what's happened here. And while I think it's fine, the only reason that realistically people are really angry about it is because they have set the precedent because of the JP version. And yes, I could sit here and say, the global version is different from the JP version, but realistically, we have that as a reference point, and people do use it as a reference point for a reason. I use it as a reference point for pretty much every video I make, so, I understand that. And what I'm going to say here is probably quite controversial, and it's not meant as condescending, because I understand how this may come across that way. But when I say it's just a game, I understand that can come across as invalidating feelings towards something that you're upset about, and that's absolutely not what I'm trying to do. If people are entitled to be upset about whatever they want, believe me, I know what it's like to have my feelings invalidated, and it's not very nice. But the reason that I say that is because I want people to remember that it being a game, it shouldn't affect your mood outside of that game. And I think it's important for people to remember that, and that comes to not just changes, unexpected changes, whether they be positive or negative or anything like that. It comes down to, well, you can choose to be upset by something, or you can kind of go, it is what it is, there's nothing I can do about it. Now, obviously, people are going to voice their disdain over this as it happens, and that's how, changes get made. Absolutely agree with that. But I think the most important thing to remember with this Setzer situation is that we don't currently have all of the available information, and we're not going to have that available information until it all kind of comes to pass. But the fact that we've had some kind of warning, because I know that Josh over at Square Enix has posted in various Discords and spoken about which banners will contain Tidus LD, there's a lot of scope for interpretation and things that we don't really know. So I think that until we know all of the information that's present, it's important not to just grab your torches and pitchforks and start storming the internet. I am of the opinion that if it turns out that Setzer doesn't have Tidus BT on it, I will sit there and I will feel, well, at least I know Tidus is coming back, with his BT plus. I can wait for that, or I could spend BT tokens. Again, this is why I try to plan to have a lot of resources, because it means that I can, prepare for unforeseen circumstances. Whether they be something positive like Core coming into the game when we didn't expect it, or a change such as this, which we didn't expect it, which affects people negatively. But again, do not take that to invalidate your feelings. If you're upset about this, you're allowed to be upset about it, and that's absolutely fine. Just try to direct it in the correct way and not attack content creators such as myself, because I've seen this happen before, not just toward me, but towards others as well. And just try to kind of remember things in relativity to one another. Now, when I start to speak about the greater issues I have with Dissidia and why I'm currently not enjoying it as much as, say, I did a year ago, is completely subjective. I don't expect people to necessarily like rally behind the things that I'm saying, or potentially even agree with them, because there are a lot of players that love the way the game is right now, are very excited about the future, very excited about BT+, very excited about C90, and the future beyond that. So please, it's very important for me to reiterate, these are my current feelings, and some of the issues that I'm going to bring up here are probably going to be quite specific to me. So please don't take this as an attack on the game or an attack on your feelings towards it if you still really love it. But the first thing that I want to talk about with this is kind of the content. It's starting to feel very monotone, and I don't know if that's because we're at the end of an era or anything like that, but certainly with the likes of Cloud of Darkness's batch, Tidus's batch, things like that, things are starting to feel very one note. And in that, you know, we've had delay orbs, we've had instant turn orbs on Lufenia. I actually quite like Lufenia as a mechanic, because even though it is quite restrictive at times, it does mean that you can't rely on the same characters forever and ever and ever, because realistically, we are playing a gacha game. Therefore, there has to be reason to want to pull for new characters as they come up. But I have to say, when I did Tidus's LD event, when I did the event that came out with Tidus's LD and BT, I was streaming it because I was doing my mobile streaming setup, and I genuinely felt guilty by the end of that stream, because I felt that it was in no way entertaining. Because the fact that the event was literally just using Tidus, quick hit, energy rain, occasionally use one of his other moves to keep his buff up. It was just literally watching one character press the same button repeatedly. And that kind of just made me feel quite disenchanted by things. And I find that this happens not all the time, but when, and this will lead into another issue that I have, I find that occasionally characters come out that seem counterproductive to the progression of the game. We've had it, and this, we've had it with Lightning, we've had it with Aranea, we have it with Tidus, we've had it with delay-based characters, but at least with delay-based characters, at least the rest of your party gets to be involved. But this actually leads into a greater issue that I have with the game, because that again is something that is quite specific to me, and yes, I could use different characters from Tidus and just not use them, but realistically, if the game is forcing me to think about the way that I play that isn't in line with how the game is wanting me to play, I feel that it's not it's an issue with the game's balancing. But nowhere else is this more apparent than with the multiplayer. Co-ops at this point, in my opinion, are a bit of a joke, to be honest. I feel that there's no interactivity within multiplayer in this game. A year ago, it wasn't so bad. Like when I started streaming the game more regularly, and I was encouraging people to want to play in co-ops and let's play together, this, that, and the other. Nowadays, when I've done that, and I don't actually do it very often anymore because of this, I noticed that no one actually wanted to play, which I thought was like, well, that kind of speaks volumes about the quality of co-ops in this game. Multiplayer is an integral part of any gacha game. And I understand that nobody wants PvP in this game. PvP bad, I get it. But when you're going into a co-op and the mechanics of the game as they are now, like bursts, LDs, etc., literally boil down to press LD to win. There's no interactivity with other players there, really. I know that there's been quality of life changes to try to improve, people who are kind of standing around not doing anything. But then you'll get somebody, like I've played in numerous co-op missions where I've never even gotten a turn because player who's gone first has activated a burst and then just gone off and finished the whole thing. Now, I understand that a lot of these are meant to be farming missions and not difficult, but when you're having to play with other players and kind of switching off before you even start, then it's not surprising that you get lots of players that kind of switch off and don't really interact with the game. So therefore, it makes sense that you get a lot of players that go AFK really quickly and it ends up taking way longer than it should. And again, maybe this is just me, and I don't think it is, because I've spoken to a lot of, other content creators, I've spoken to a lot of people in my streams, things like that. And I've discovered that most people actually just don't do co-ops at all, and that they actually kind of just do it by themselves, because despite the fact that you get less items for clearing it by yourself, it's still somehow quicker. And I feel that that's something that, you know, speaks volumes about the quality of multiplayer in this game. I think it could be made better quite easily by, you know, lots of other gacha games have an alternative thing that allows people to interact with one another. I'm not necessarily saying it has to be PvP or guild versus guild or anything like that, but there's mini games that could be a thing, or, you know, maybe we could have harder content for co-ops or anything like that. But because we follow the JP line, you know, quite so strictly as most gacha games do, I don't see anything like this happening. And going forward, I can't see how multiplayer is going to improve anytime soon, and to me, that's a little disheartening. The next thing I wanted to talk about is that this is something that a lot of JP players probably will disagree with me on, but it's something I notice a lot when looking through Reddit, looking through people's general sentiments when it comes to Dissidia Opera Omnia. And a lot of people complain about, like, the number crunch and the fact that, like, numbers in the game are just too big. There's too much going on the screen. There's too much going on, you know, at any given time. And the reason that I'm using this sort of layout is because I kind of had that realization myself when I was looking at Cloud and the way that he has developed throughout this game. So I'm bringing this up because I'm actually using a couple of videos that I wanted to showcase here. So a big shout out to Cybernetic Gaming, Stimpy, and VL as well, who all are making videos for the game. And, you know, that I wanted to showcase it using them. So right here I have a video which is from a couple of years ago showing what Cloud's cross slash once looked like. So as you can see here, it's got that punch to it where it's like 1, 2, 3. Which is fantastic. We like that. It's all good. You know, that's the way that cross slash should look. So now when we come over to this video here that showcases what his C90 looks like and his new EX, etc. When we look at that, we can see now that cross slash doesn't really look like cross slash anymore. At least to me. It kind of looks like cross chainsaw at this point because it's just hit HP, here, brr, brr, brr. It's like it doesn't have the same flow to it. So for me, there's a loss of identity from the Dissidia name because, you know, each character's moves, they're the same, but they're not the same, and yet it just doesn't look right to me. Never did I feel this more, and I was watching VL's clear of the Enacro event as I was coming up, and I noticed something very interesting that made me go, hold on a second. So if you look here, right, so Cloud's bravery here is 52,000. That is not the amount of HP damage he deals. And don't get me wrong, there's obviously a lot of reason here for, you know, HP percentage pluses, all sorts of things like that. But when the damage difference is literally like 50k to nearly 200k, it's giving me pause to think, does bravery actually mean anything anymore? Like, it's you know, because the percentile gains are so huge, there's a level of disconnect for me between the mechanics of what Dissidia is. So, you know, you gain bravery through hits, obviously, you know, you can have brave gains and things like that, and then that translates into the amount of HP damage you deal. But even now, in global version, it's very rare I actually take much notice of how much damage my individual bravery hits are doing, because all I really care about is that total HP damage value at the end and whether I've broken the enemy or not. So for me, I kind of looked at it and I thought, I don't know how I feel about this, because it's like, yes, it's exciting, big numbers, people love big numbers, and yet for me it does kind of feel very disconnected to what it once was. Now I want to talk about something I do think that Dissidia does right. Now Dissidia, like Opera Omnia, has always been very well known for being a very generous game. In terms of how many resources it gives you, how many, like, you know, gems, how it's easy to save, how most characters are very viable. There's lots of really good things about the way that Dissidia presents the gacha element of itself. And obviously gacha games nowadays are a dime a dozen. There's so many out there, so the fact that there is such generosity in Dissidia is very apparent. However, I do think that, you know, there is a level of illusion to that generosity, and that illusion comes from the fact that very few people straight buy gems. I mean, this coming from somebody who has bought a lot of the costumes in the game. You know, I buy Mog Pass every month, this, that, and the other. So, you know, I've spent my fair share of money in this game, and, you know, but I do think that level of ridiculousness when it comes to the pricing of gems does kind of give people a reason not to want to spend, but also the number of banners on which people are pulling on. You know, we get banners maybe twice a week. You know, like that's quite frequent for a new character. So you don't be led into thinking that it's a bad thing that we get so many events all in a day, because I also think that it's great that we don't have them come in all the time. Like, we're not expected to play this game 24 hours a day. Like, I've had my fair share of time with War of the Visions, and that game expects you to be on there permanently. And I like the fact that Dissidia doesn't. You go on, you do your event, and when you come off the event, you can kind of put it down, maybe check back in, do a bit of artifact farming, do a little bit of raiding if you need to, if they come up. And then, but by and large, once the event is done, it's done. Like, you only really need to spend loads of time on the game if you're newer to it and you're playing catch up. And also with the gacha elements as well, I do think that there's a lot of generosity that a lot of other gachas don't have, such as we have the EX shop, we have the BT shop, yeah, we have a pity system. You know, that's something that, while certain elements of that are, you know, relevant in other gacha games as well, like pities are not a new thing, and I've played my fair share of other gachas to see that, but we have lots of elements that aren't necessarily in others. Like, I've seen lots of people say, oh, where's the LD shop? I'm like, we should be thankful we have like EX, BT, and pities, let alone thinking, well, you know, you've got to pull for something somewhere down the line, otherwise it's not really doing its job. But I think that the level of fairness when it comes to that, and this is coming from somebody who has historically had catastrophic luck, and I still have been able to save up a lot of resources. Yes, I've obviously spent money on it, but not all of that has been, you know, paid gems. A lot of that does come from the game itself. We get summon boards periodically. We get story events. We get events where we get given like 400 tickets at a time, or like 60,000 gems, which is a lot. And they're all very, very welcome. So I think that something that players should take stock of is the fact that the game, you know, when we say that Dissidia is a generous game, we do actually mean it, especially considering the fact that when you do pull for a character, the most recent character I pulled was Rosa. You know, I probably won't use a huge amount going forward. I'll probably use her a lot because I like her, and I can use her because I like her, which is a really nice factor as well. But when her C90 and EX++, or whatever you want to call them, come out, I don't have to pull anything for her. I just have her. And I have a reason to be excited for the fact that I have her, beyond the fact that I have her right now. And that is something that's a very regular thing in Dissidia. And I think that it's something that there isn't enough attention given to that. I think the generosity of the game isn't necessarily due to the amount of resources that we get, though it is a generous thing, of course. It's due to the fact that when we get a character, it tends to stick around. Even if it's not necessarily immediate, we're going to like them in the future, by and large. So the next thing that I want to talk about is probably something that is an issue I have that's more relating to me as a content creator than it does to other people. But I'm curious to see if this annoys other people as much as it does me. And it's something that Dissidia has always kind of had, which is an inconsistent schedule. Now, as a streamer, as a full-time content creator, I obviously want to have consistency in the number of streams that I do, the timings in which I do them, so that people know when they can come and find me. But because Dissidia has the most strange, inconsistent scheduling I've ever seen in a mobile game, or any game for that matter, I can't find the consistent days in which I can do stuff, because there are some weeks where we get one event, some weeks where we get two. One week we'll have an event on a Monday and a Thursday, the next week it will just be Wednesday, then it's Tuesday and Friday. It's so all over the place, it's impossible to plan anything around it. And it means that when I'm trying to learn to stream or make content for other games, I'm kind of trapped in this kind of, you know, inconsistent scheduling, because I try to stream the events as they come out, even though they come out at 3 o'clock in the morning in the UK, so I have to wait until the following morning to do them, so that it's still fresh and relevant for my viewers as they come along. You know, I can't then make video or like make streams for, say, Final Fantasy XIV, which is the game that I'm streaming as much as I am Dissidia, like on, say, Tuesdays or Fridays, or I can't have a consistent timing because the next week or the next month will come out and we'll get the next community stream and it will be, oh, okay, so this event's coming out on a Tuesday and a Friday. And I'm like, right, so either I have to then make 2 streams that day and then do videos in between, or I have to then, you know, skip something to cater to Dissidia. And it's a very, very first world problem, you know, being a full-time content creator. I'm very, very fortunate to be in the position I'm in. But it's definitely a bugbear I have with Dissidia, because I don't think I've ever seen another mobile game do this. Like, I've played Brave Exvius, War of the Visions, Record Keeper, I've played Dragalia Lost, I've played Fire Emblem. None of them do what Dissidia does in terms of its scheduling. And I wanted to bring it up because it is something that frustrates me as a content creator, and I was curious as to whether it's something that annoys other people as much. So the next thing that I want to talk about is something that is coinciding with the general populace and the general community for Opera Omnia, as well as something that is more specific to me as a content creator and why I'm burning out a little bit more than I used to a year ago. And it's that I don't think that there is enough information given to new players for Dissidia Final Fantasy Opera Omnia. Now, the number of times where I get asked about, you know, power stones, like passives, how they're gained, etc. by new players is proof, to me at least, that the game is not explaining its own mechanics enough. So many times do I find people who say, oh, I've sold this weapon because it wasn't the strongest one. Was that a mistake? And it's like, yes. Now, don't get me wrong. I and many other content creators have made beginner's guides, things that try to help people to get through those things. And, you know, that's a natural thing to happen in this day and age. You could argue that, you know, it's just the way the world is now with the internet, content creators, social media, that you can expect that those sorts of things are going to happen, and that content creators and external resources will explain in greater detail how the mechanics of the game works. However, when the game is so sparse in its explanations, like when they kind of include them in a slide where there's little bits and pieces that have the text and inform people but it's lost in a big old presentation, it's very hard for a new player not to feel overwhelmed by everything that's going on. So at that point you have to ask yourself, well, if the game's not explaining it to me, then how am I supposed to know? And the way I would fix this is when you think about other Final Fantasy games, such as Final Fantasy VII. When it comes up, Final Fantasy VII has a full-blown tutorial on materia and how it works, and it's done through a video, and it's gone, press this to do this. Why does Dissidia not even have like an in-game YouTube video or something like that the player can watch to learn about how to get their characters to their maximum efficiency? And also, there is so much more per character now than there was a year ago, 2 years ago, when the game first came out. And this is easily exemplified by, and I'm going to use my own videos here as an example. So this is a video of mine from a year ago. So a year ago, this was the double banner that had Fujin, Cyan in it. And as you can see, the video and I had all the same content. Like, I still spoke about the event. I still spoke about, you know, what each character did. Took 19 minutes. Now, obviously, Would You Pull wasn't a thing back then, but that takes maybe 4 minutes of my videos. Now let's look at my Cloud of Darkness video. My Cloud of Darkness video is 37 minutes long and features the same number of characters. So that on its own, obviously clock the difference between like visuals then and visuals now. You know, that goes to show quite how much more information there is to give in any given time. And obviously when we're doing this twice a week as content creators, when we're doing this every week, every event, every time 2 characters comes out at once, reworks, LDs, BTs, BT pluses, C90s, I think that it gets easier as like characters that just get that get a C90 or a small upgrade through their C90s, etc. is noteworthy. But the fact of the matter is that because every move now has so much more to it, which brings me back to the whole, number crunching, everything is just like exploding all over the screens. There's so many percentile buffs, things like that. These were things that weren't quite so big when I first started making videos for this game, which was about 2 years ago. So that, to me, at least, it means that my workload, as it were, is much, much higher than it was back then, because it was, the information was more palatable. And the thing that I feel that I can do as a content creator is consolidate information to make it digestible for people who don't necessarily want to know all of the numbers, all of the percentages, potency numbers, etc. I am not the best player of this game in the world, not by a long shot. There are many content creators out there that are better than this game than me. There are things that I miss when I do my schedule pulls occasionally, and I don't think I've ever missed anything that would have changed my mind on those characters, or I would like to hope that I haven't said anything that other people would say is wildly incorrect and would change things. In fact, there have been times such as when Caniex was brought forward early and I said he wasn't particularly useful, that people read me to filth over, and then it turned out a week later nobody was using him. So, there are times where people are very, contesting, and that's fine. I want people to have their opinions. But the fact of the matter is that when a new player comes along to this game, they're seeing that, to learn about a character is a 40-minute long video, and I would love to know how to, constrict my videos to make them shorter. So if anyone has any advice on that, I'll happily hear it, because I think it's nicer it's more digestible for there to be a 20-minute video rather than a 40-minute one. But there's definitely an issue that I take with that leads to me being a little bit more burnt out than I was before, like a year ago. So again, that comes to me being a content creator, and I'm curious as to whether other content creators feel the same way as I do on this particular front. But I also think that it's relative to the amount of information that a new player has to take on. So not only do I want to hear from perhaps other content creators who feel that way about the videos that they make themselves, but also new players. Do you think that perhaps there's too much information to take in at once? Have you made mistakes that that you wish the game had told you about, that you perhaps didn't know, and things like that? Because I can only speak from my experience and the experiences of people who talk directly to me about the way they feel about the game. So I'm curious as to what you guys think on that front as well. So the last thing that I want to talk about with regards to how I feel about the game before I start looking at perhaps what other people have said, I kind of wanted to talk about the probably the worst thing, but also something I think has the most potential to be made better, and there's been evidence to suggest it as well, is that the content itself feels very monotonous. I said this at the beginning of the video, and I restricted it to kind of how I felt about, say, Delay and Tidus, and instant turns, just going off, doing your thing, whatever. I feel that this game goes it plays it safe very, very much when it comes to its actual length of content. Ultimately, lost chapters and new character events and story events are all basically the same thing. There is the only real content behind them, as far as I'm concerned, as a veteran player. I did want to sort of reiterate as well, I have played this game since the very first day it came out. The very first day it came out, I have not missed an event. I have never left an event uncleared. Never. All of the hardest Lufenias, all the chaoses. I even finished Lena's EX back in the 35 CP era. So I have finished every single event as it's come out. And at this point in time, I feel like every event kind of feels the same. It's all nothings until you get to Chaos Challenges and Lufenia missions. And there is other content that I actually genuinely enjoy. I love Dimension's End. I love boss rushes. And I love Abyss. I will come back to Abyss in a bit, because that is something I really appreciate and I love, and I really want to kind of drive home as something I think is a real positive direction. But Lufenia and Chaos Challenges feels like the whole event, as a new event comes up, is half an hour, maybe that. The rest of the time is spent after you've pulled for a character. So for example, let's use a new character as an example. So let's use Queen, for example. Queen's actually a good example of what I want to talk about here as well. Let's say you pull for Queen, you get Queen's LD, her EX, everything, all in very, very early. You are then spending 20 minutes going through her weapons to max them out, pick all of the, like, get all of her passives sorted, sort her artifacts out, sort her passives out, get her armor, get this, that, and the other, and that's a fault of the UI as far as I'm concerned. Like, yes, we got improvements where you can pick up all of the armor you need at once, etc. You know, but that's kind of it. And then you go, and then you have to do a summon boards, which takes half an hour minimum. You know, so that's an hour gone before you've even started the mission. And then you get to, like, the EX, the Cosmos, you know, Cosmos co-ops, and they're all kind of, it feels like a hamster wheel in that regard, where it's just like, I'm just kind of running for the sake of running. Then you get to, like, Chaos Challenge and Lufenia. Now, Chaos Challenge I know a lot of people don't like because they feel very restricted on the number of characters they can use. I actually do like them because it encourages me to use characters I wouldn't have normally, and it allows me to think outside the box. And then the Lufenia is what you're left with. And then the Lufenia is just one thing, like, it will take 20 minutes. And the reason I say Queen's a good example, and I actually want to give a shout out to one of my patrons who mentioned this, Doc Shoot'ems, the idea of fail faster. Now, the idea of this is obviously when you go into a mission, as you go through the mission, they get stronger as time goes on, which makes sense. You know, it's a perfectly legit thing. But when you spend 20 minutes on one mission and they've gotten strong and then they insta-wipe you, or for whatever reason, because you've run out of skills, or because they've managed to overpower you in some manner or another, or the turn counts run over, etc., you've then got to go back and start it all from the beginning again. Whereas with Queen's event, the event was mostly loaded into its front part of the mission. So, like, the monsters would do their biggest attacks early, and as long as you could survive those, you were able to kind of get, you know, hit the ground running, and then you could finish the mission as normal, and then you have to keep up with the pace of it. And I really liked that mission. It was a really good one. But then there are other missions where it just feels like you're going through the motions, and, you know, you can take it or leave it. Not just the character, but the event itself. Tidus, again, I did use this example for a reason, but I was bored. I was straight up bored when I was playing through that mission. And not only is it the fault of Tidus himself, but it's the fault of the mission. The mission was literally take instant turns. And if you had Core and Tidus, the mission was a it was nothing. It was really poor. But I don't think that every mission is like this. I think the game goes through peaks and troughs, which it should. Not every mission should be super difficult and restrictive, and not every mission should be super easy and boring. There should be peaks and troughs. So, like, the start of Lufenia Plus, a lot of people are really frightened of it, but I think it's very similar to the start of Chaos Era, which was scary to JP players because they didn't have the foresight that global players who, like myself, who don't necessarily play JP, or even those that do, they know how to tackle it because they've experienced it once before, so they then know how to deal with it. It's very similar to Chaos, and yes, it is restrictive on certain missions, like Quistis is one that's coming out that I know a lot of people are very, very hot and cold on because they don't want to feel like they have to pull for Quistis. But, you know, at least there's a reason to go for it. And I just hope that the mission is interesting enough to warrant the pull. Because if you do the pull for Quistis and the mission is delay for 3 turns, and, like, they have HP regen if you don't delay them a lot, it's dull. It's not good mission design. It's just, did you get the thing? No, then you can't do it. Did you get the thing? Yes, then you can do it. And I don't appreciate that. And I think that that's a restrictive element of Lufenia as a mechanic. But I think that there are times where it's done really well. An example of this that I think is going to be a really hot take for a lot of people, because I know a lot of people didn't like it, was the mission that came out after Mog. Now, Mog came out and everyone knew that that mission was super easy, you could take Yuffie and just rinse it. Well, then they re-released it in an Abyss and you couldn't, and you had to think outside the box. You had to actually do it properly. And a lot of people said, oh, I have to pull for Mog because it's the way I have to do it. No, there were loads of clears, including my own, that didn't take Mog. You know, I used Squall with a water-based call that meant that I could keep his buff up, and that was exciting to me. And I think that that's why I like Abyss. I think Abyss is fantastic content for this game, because while it definitely still gives like that same kind of going through the motions until you get to the end game content. It's not as egregious because it encourages you to use other characters that perhaps you wouldn't normally. So in that particular example, that I hadn't used Squall in ages, but like now I had a reason to. I used Rydia for that, and it was really good, and and I'd never really used her before. That's the kind of thing I want to see more of from this game, and not just here's a lost chapter, off you go, get the Lufenia done in half an hour, wait a few days, here's a character event. I feel that I need more variety from this game, because it does sometimes feel like I'm kind of going through the motions on the hamster wheel, and I don't know if that's how everybody else feels, and I'm going to say this again before I move into any other comments or anything like that. This is not me saying the game is bad. This is not me saying that I don't want to play it anymore. This is me voicing my personal gripes with the game that I didn't feel were there a year ago that are there now, and I want to be able to speak my truth without feeling like I'm going to get attacked for it. Because we should be allowed to critique the things that we enjoy. I said it at the beginning of the video, and I'm going to say it again now. So as always with any videos like this I make, I like to try and get opinions outside of my own so that I can showcase the fact that I'm not just being crazy and being a grumpy old man with it. But equally, I did want to ask people about how much they're enjoying the game and the things that they do enjoy about it as much as the things that they're not. Like I said, this is not a doom and gloom video. It is a constructive critique on the way I think that things could be improved. So I asked my patrons, and a massive thank you goes out to all of you as well, about how they felt with things, about how they would improve certain things, about the things that they're happiest about. So I have some comments that I thought I'd share with you all. So Silverhawk says, maybe one of the ways they could spice up Lufenia or Lufenia Plus missions is by adding variety to the clear requirements. It's always the same things. Don't get KO'd, complete it in X turns, and take less than X damage. But there's opportunity for all sorts of other requirements to be used. For example, it could be use a green character, or don't use a summon, something to mix it up a bit. I agree with this 100%. I think that by having the same requirements every time, it limits design space so much. And again, let's talk Abyss. Abyss does exactly this, and it's really good content. It's really enjoyable. Boss Rush mixes it up a little bit by making it so that it's parties that you take along and that you can do it that way. I think that that's a fantastic idea, and I completely agree with it. Cobalt Zork says, one thing I think OO does well is that it's manageable in terms of content. We get content semi-regularly, roughly 3 times every fortnight, with the occasional feast and famine depending on the time of year. The content we get is largely grind-free. Not sure I agree with that. Really, only summon boards are truly grindy, and they only last a week or two every other month. I did Brothers passively over 10 days, just doing a couple of 10-minute sessions a day. Occasionally you need to grind a bit for crystals, but usually 5 minutes with a book will max out most new characters. I didn't actually consider that when it came to the characters as you pull them, is that sometimes you need crystals as well, so that's another 15 minutes or so you can add to that. As an adult with a job and a family, that level of involvement fits in nicely with my life. I do agree with this. I just think that there is a little bit more grindiness because you still have to do the summon boards for a character. To get a character to their maximum potential from the moment you pull them is a lot longer than just, oh, off we go then. Something it doesn't do quite so well for me, at least, is give you all the information you need in the correct ways. Lots of people have mentioned about the new player experience, but I think even having played the game just before Chaos, there are things that the game doesn't do very well in terms of conveying information. A prime example is in what skills do. It's very hard to work out the full effects of a skill without jumping between the skill section, then into the equipment passive page, and remembering which passive is for which skill because they're differently named, then into another section of the passive screen for the extension, then maybe into the board passive section in case character boards add anything spicy. I could and have to look this up online to get a single page view. I shouldn't have to. There are other examples of this, like the status pane in Fight will say things like special effect from some skill, but then not tell you what the effect is. Again, I agree with this. Like, I think that the UI has come a long way, and there are a lot of improvements that we've had, like getting rid of the bloody Star Wars scroll at the start of each mission, getting rid of all of that stuff. I really do think is a massive improvement, but I still think it has a long way to go. The example that I've seen used here before is that when using, say, Shining Shield, and I'll show you these on the screen. Shining Shield doesn't actually tell you what it does for a lot of the time. Certainly, like with regards to when you have, Guardian Shield up, with like his Warrior of Light's LD effect, when you hover over the character, it just says you have this many turns of Guardian Shield left. but it doesn't actually tell you what Guardian Shield is doing. Now, yes, you can look all of this up. And, you know, me as a content creator, other content creators always try to convey this information in a, you know, digestible manner. But the point of the matter is that we shouldn't have to, realistically. Like, the game should be telling you these things. And this comes back to my point about the game being over-reliant on its external resources to convey its information. And again, I understand that in this day and age, that's a normal thing. But could you imagine if there were no content creators for this game? Could you imagine if there were none of Tonbury Troop's fantastic infographics for this game? Loads of people would just drop it like a rock because they wouldn't have a clue what was going on. And I think that that is an unfortunate truth when it comes to Dissidia, and it goes back to what I was saying about not conveying its information well, certainly not to new players. So Alex says, the biggest thing I like about this game is that the unit kits keep on evolving and changing and being upgraded and reworked considering how many FF games are featured and how different the opinions on favourites can be. I love that no units are mandatory and everyone will get their time to shine sooner or later. Not only does this prevent people from sticking to tier lists and meta units like the Bible, but it also makes using resources and investing into characters never truly wasteful. As a person with 2 kids and a full-time job, and all I personally enjoy is the pace, I'm glad to not be forced to play all day every day, and I never really feel the dead game vibe. DFFOO is my main mobile game, and I'm totally fine with that. I love this because I think that this is absolutely true. I get so many comments going, Joe, make a tier list. And I'm like, no, I'm not going to make a tier list because in a week's time, it'll be completely different. Like, that's a double-edged sword as well. Like, you know, people complain about power creep and the numbers getting too big and the numbers consuming the screen and stuff like that, which I do actually agree with. But equally, it does mean that it's always evolving, it's always changing, it doesn't get stale. Like, you know, even as somebody who played in the 35CP era, we had the Litico era of Lightning, Tidus and Ico, so those veterans will remember that. But, you know, that changed up because the way that things came forward within the global version made it all very different, and I really enjoyed that, and I like the fact that it's constantly evolving. However, the new player experience is absolutely awful. After the brief tutorial in the Mog Gym and such, you're just out there with little understanding about how game mechanics work and what you're supposed to do, especially with pulls and weapon upgrades, not to mention fight mechanics. Without the platforms like Discord, Reddit, YouTubers, and resources like all the websites covering the game, I feel like half the possible players would leave the game on day one, and those who don't get hooked by the look and gameplay enough to inform themselves probably do exactly that. I did say that earlier, and this is like why, and I know that Alex here is a newer player to the game, which I think, you know, obviously that we are getting new players, but I definitely think that the scope of intimidation towards new players in this game is actually really quite large, and it does concern me for the future of the game, because if you're not bringing new players in and you're reliant on your veteran players, your player number's only ever going to go down, and that is something that we have to keep in mind. Andrew Collins says, I personally have been taking a break from OO. I still watch what's going on, mostly via the Would You Pull videos, but I needed a break. The why of it is also one of the cons of the game. The constant power creep was starting to make the game feel more like a job than it was just having fun. Once you get to endgame and start down the rabbit hole, you never seem to be able to rest and just enjoy the characters you have. There is always this sense, real or imagined, that you will fall behind if you don't get the new shinies. In fact, that hinders me returning as well. I've taken a couple months off and am thus behind. On to what I really like about DFFOO, I love the stories. I love the characters that I've come to love get to continue on after their games and mingle with each other across games. The stories are fairly well written as well. There are a couple of chapters that fall flat, but most are excellent. As an extra pro, despite the feeling I constantly need to keep up, I really like how the premium currency is handled. They're very generous with their rewards in this game, and it makes it somewhat unique amongst other gachas. OO is actually free to play, which isn't something most other games can say with any honesty. The power creep thing I think is interesting because on one side you do have this constantly evolving thing and the characters never get boring and there's always something new and exciting to come. But I can understand how it can feel overwhelming for some players because it feels like what you have is never enough, which I don't personally feel. Like, I skip a lot of banners, and, you know, I go without on a lot of banners. Like, I never got Lightning BT, I don't currently have Tidus BT, I never got a lot of the big stuff. Like, I tried to reserve my stuff for the biggest stuff, but there is a lot of what you'd call meta gear that I don't have. So, you know, I don't feel that that's necessarily true, but I do understand where that feeling comes from, and that's why I think it's really important to know that that sense, while it's real, it's actually kind of the main draw of any gacha game. you feel like you fall behind if you don't get the new shinies, therefore you have to get the new shiny thing. But the reality is you actually don't. And I think that this is something that Dissidia actually handles very well. And, I think that because, if you co-ops, realistically, if you do go into them with other players and stuff like that, you'll find that they have the new shiny toy and then you're watching them use it. And that's how I feel about multiplayer, is that it's kind of just a big advert for people to showcase what they've got to make you then want to go and get the thing. But that is the nature of gachas as a whole. The stories, I'll be honest, I've been skipping the stories for Dissidia for quite a long time now. But I must admit, there are certain times in the older sort of period of the game where I think back really fondly on those stories. Like, I loved Faris's first interaction with Zidane. I thought it was really cute. I really loved the entire Kuja Vivi on the Lifer tree, on the Aether tree, sorry, interaction during that story chapter. A lot of people really liked Makina's story chapter. The story is all fan service, but it's fan service done well. So that's pretty much where I'm at when it comes to Dissidia at the moment. Like I said at the beginning of the video, I have no intention of quitting the game right now, but there are a lot of things present in the game that A, are starting to turn me off about the game now, and B, are starting to turn me off about stuff in the future as well, thanks to watching JP videos and sort of hearing about what people think and how every time a new character comes out, everyone's like, oh, have you seen this character? They're broken. It's like, yes, I was the character last week. I am in a unique position when it comes to that stuff, because obviously people come and talk to me a lot about these things, and therefore I have a bit of a warped view. But I'm also not under the impression that my view can't change. Like, I do think that I would love for my opinion to sort of like be back on the rise and me feel the same passion for the game as I did a year ago, and me not kind of feel like I'm on a hamster wheel and unable to get off. As a content creator that is trying to kind of spread his wings a little bit and be a bit more creative and try new things and stuff like that, I'm frightened to do that, and that's why I've only kind of dabbled in little bits and pieces instead of going full hog into it, because I'm really frightened that it is going to alienate a lot of my existing follower base, and I really hope that that doesn't happen. But obviously, I want to be able to speak my truth when it comes to the game, and there are a lot of things about it that I'm not so happy with. And there's stuff that I'm not happy with that other people are. There's a lot of people who are really excited for the C90 era. There's a lot of people excited for certain burst characters to come along. But I hope that you guys don't hold it against me for feeling a certain type of way about sort of the things that I've spoken about today, because it's something that I've wanted to get off my chest, and I have done on streams but never on YouTube in the past, and I wanted to at least kind of give people reason or pause for thought when it comes to how I'm feeling about the game and why I'm perhaps not enjoying it as much as I did a year ago. And obviously, feel free to comment below if you have opinions when it comes to the Setzer thing, when it comes to any of the stuff that I've said about Dissidia today, and all with regards to any of that. And a massive thank you to all of my patrons and to anyone who supports the channel, whether they're viewing it, for supporting me financially, sub to the YouTube, come watch me on Twitch, all of that stuff, because I really do appreciate it. The reason it's taken me so long to make a video like this, despite the fact that I have felt like this for a while, is because I wanted to, I really don't want to let anybody down, and I don't want to let you, my followers, down for thinking that perhaps I'm just gonna throw in the towel, because it's absolutely not the case, and I want to be respectful to the game I don't want to bite the hand that feeds me at the end of the day. Like, Dissidia has done a lot for me, and I do want to give back as best I can, but I also don't want to have to feel the need to stay quiet if there's things that I don't particularly like. So like I said, sound off in the comments below if you disagree or agree with some of the things that I've said here. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Come and find me over on Twitch, where I'll be playing more Dissidia as it comes out. Final Fantasy 14, I've got lots coming up when it comes to Final Fantasy Count Up as well. We've got Pixel Remasters, we've got FF6 coming up soon, 4-Job Fiesta, loads of really cool stuff. And I hope that you guys will embrace the things that I've said and not grind too heavily against it. And also a shout out to Vial, Cybernetic and Stimpy for the clips that I showed out earlier. They're very, very good YouTubers. You should definitely go and check them out if you haven't already. And then that's going to be it from me. So thank you all very much, and I'll see you soon. Bye.